Hi, I'm Travis Feuerbacher. I was a visa officer with the U.S. Department of State, where I interviewed tens of thousands of visa applicants from all over the world. And now I practice law as a U.S. immigration attorney, helping visa applicants navigate through the complex application and interview processes. Today I want to talk a little bit about O-1 visas. Specifically, why are they so hard to obtain, maybe even a little bit more difficult now than they used to be? And so first of all, what is an O-1 visa? Well, O visas are generally for applicants who have extraordinary abilities or capabilities in a number of different fields. It could be somebody who has proven themselves to be extraordinary in various business fields. Maybe somebody who has extensive experience in venture capital or entrepreneurship. But it could also be for artists or entertainers or even people in the motion picture field. It could be for scientists who have established that they are extraordinary in the field of science in which they practice. And so now that we know what an O visa is for, let's talk a little bit about the process to seek an O visa. Then I'll talk a little bit about why it can be so difficult to actually get that O visa in your passport. So first of all, the process to obtain an O visa. It is, generally speaking, a two-step process. And to make matters even a little bit more confusing and complicated, there are two completely separate government agencies that are involved in this two-step process. So step one is what we call the petition. This is where a petitioner, usually an employer or somebody on behalf of the applicant, called the beneficiary, files the petition. In the petition, the petitioner and probably many other people will explain why the beneficiary, why the applicant should be qualified for the visa and should ultimately be approved. They will summarize the achievements and accomplishments of the applicant, maybe some awards that the applicant has received, some recognition they've received. There may be letters of support from multiple people who are already recognized and distinguished in their field, explaining why the applicant should be approved. Now, that petition is submitted to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, a completely separate agency from the U.S. Department of State, which is involved in step two. So USCIS, the first agency involved, will review that petition only on paper. They will review what the petitioner and what all these other people have said about the applicant. And if it appears that the applicant is qualified for an O visa, USCIS will approve the petition. And that's the first step. That brings us to step two. With an approved petition, at least for applicants who are outside of the United States, step two is to schedule a visa interview. And in many instances, this can actually be more difficult than that initial petition phase, where again, an agency is just looking at what has been submitted on writing. At the visa interview, it is actually incumbent on the applicant. It's the applicant's responsibility to establish why they deserve the O visa, why they are qualified, why they are extraordinary or exceptional in their field. And this can be very difficult. First, a lot of visa officers come into this situation with, I would say, unfair expectations. The word extraordinary is kind of a superlative. It does bring to mind people who are maybe Nobel Prize winners or Olympic athletes. And some visa officers will assume that if you don't rise to that extreme level in your field, you simply are not qualified for an O visa. And that's a little bit unfair, I think. And so some applicants, I think, are denied simply because they don't live up to very lofty expectations. But beyond that, it can still be extremely difficult to qualify, even with visa officers that are more willing to listen to reason and logic and really rationalize whether an applicant is or is not approvable. And that can all start with a couple of different factors that often lead to delays and even denials. And the first possible factor that can lead to an O visa denial is simply unclear responses during the visa interview. I've worked with a number of O visa applicants who have been refused before, and when I ask them how their last interview went, they can explain to me that they really didn't give a lot of specific answers. In O visa interviews, the first question is often pretty specific. What do you do for work? Or even, what makes you extraordinary? And that's the applicant's initial kind of first opportunity to establish themselves as somebody who is outstanding, who is extraordinary. Many applicants will answer that question with a very vague answer. Well, I've had a number of years working in the art industry. Or I've been in the hospitality industry for a long time and I've done a lot of big things. An answer like that doesn't really establish anything. Remember that if you are going to an interview for an O visa, you have to be extremely specific. It is your responsibility to volunteer context and details about exactly why you qualify. A good starting point is to review the petition that was filed on your behalf. There's usually a really good summary in that petition that identifies exactly why you qualify. It will generally list your achievements, awards that you've received, different positions you've held, maybe salaries that you commanded that were higher than others, letters of recommendation that have been filed on your behalf from people who are well respected in the field. Those are the types of details that you should be prepared to essentially go through, to summarize for your officer, to explain exactly why you should be approved. But beyond unclear responses, humility is another factor that often leads to complications at the O interview. It's really difficult, but the way the interview is set up, the applicant really does have to establish why they should be approved. So in a way, this is your opportunity to brag a little bit. And for those people who are a little bit more prone to brag, to people with a little bit of a larger ego, this may come as a natural thing that they can do easily in the interview. But for many O visa applicants, they are not as prone to bragging about their achievements and their qualifications. I often work with very humble applicants who find it extremely awkward to brag about what they've accomplished. And that can lead to a denial. Because remember, it's your responsibility as a visa applicant to establish why you should be approved. So try to shift into the mindset of bragging about what you've done before you go to that interview. Be prepared to say, I'm extraordinary because I've done all these things. I've won these awards. I've been featured in these international media outlets. This individual who is extremely well respected said this about me. That is the type of detail that you need to be prepared to volunteer. And I understand that that can be very difficult for some people. The third factor that often leads to denial, which I think is quite unfortunate, is simply age. It can be difficult for a visa officer to conclude that you have risen to the level of being completely outstanding or extraordinary if you are young. And it doesn't only mean age. Yes, a young applicant may have a difficult time being approved. I've worked with O applicants who were told bluntly, you're doing amazing. I just don't think you're there yet because you're so young. But age also becomes a factor in your number of years of experience. I've also worked with truly inspirational, outstanding O applicants who, despite only having a few years in their field, have absolutely established themselves as somebody who is extraordinary, somebody at the top of that field. But that can still be a difficult situation to explain to a visa officer who may be expecting decades of experience and decades of a track record of media attention and awards and lofty job titles, and that could be a big hurdle to overcome. Number 4 is actually something that is usually something easy to overcome, and that is limited online presence. Visa officers love to Google applicants. I did this all the time when I was an officer, especially when I was confronted with an O applicant. If somebody is extraordinary, it's likely that they have at least some sort of online presence. So I would Google their name. I would often Google the company they worked for, and I would look at how they are reflected online. An O applicant, especially one who is applying as expert in business or a field related to the business sector, if they are not reflected anywhere online, if it's not easy to find articles either written about them or that they have written, if they're not featured on their company's website, that can be a bit of a red flag. Because if they really are that extraordinary, they should be easy to find in a simple Google search. So if you're preparing for your O visa interview, take a quick look through the internet and see how you're reflected. And it may be an opportunity to talk to your company and maybe others to say, hey, I should probably be featured a little bit more prominently to reflect my achievements and my status as somebody at the top of my field. And then the last factor, the fifth factor that does unfortunately often lead to denials and other complications in the O interview process is simply having weak qualifications. There are applicants who legitimately may be extraordinary. They may be accomplished. They may kind of be on the verge of qualifying for an O visa. But this is where I would say, if you're not confident that you have a good case, if your immigration lawyer isn't confident that you have a good application, even though USCIS might approve that petition, that does not guarantee that your visa officer will issue the visa. I always like to err on the side of being cautious and conservative. And so if you're not really confident about your chance of success as an O applicant, it might be a good opportunity to evaluate other routes to a U.S. visa. Remember, the O interview is kind of a separate, wholly contained step in the interview process. While a visa officer should take an approval from USCIS in step 1 as a good sign, visa officers are actually required to evaluate you with a fresh lens when you appear for your interview. Remember, the O interview is the first time a U.S. government employee has ever actually met with you, the applicant, directly, one-on-one. So they have seen what other people have said about you, but they haven't evaluated what you have to say about yourself and how you explain your qualifications directly. And so this is a crucial step in the process. It's not something that is a mere formality. It is a step that you do need to be prepared for, and you do need to be prepared to confidently establish why you should be approved. If you aren't confident that you deserve this visa, don't chance it. Think about other paths and explore that with your immigration attorney. Now, if you are on the verge of either scheduling your O visa interview or maybe your interview is coming up, reach out to us. We would love to help you prepare. We often work with O visa applicants to help them practice likely interview questions. We can also evaluate more complicated situations. For example, if you've been denied multiple times in the past, maybe you have a criminal history that needs to be addressed. Maybe you have a visa ineligibility that might require a waiver. Or maybe you just simply want to be as prepared as you possibly can. Reach out to us and we will help you. One of the things I love to do with O applicants is help them prepare a portfolio of their accomplishments, something visual that they can show their visa officer during the interview that will resonate with the officer and help to establish that they are qualified, that the applicant should be approved. And this is something that we can absolutely do with you. So reach out to us at info@zfvisa.com or visit our website, zfvisa.com, and schedule a meeting with us. We're happy to help you navigate through your journey, and we wish you all the best as you move forward.